Faye, I believe it's you doing the introduction.
Thank you for joining the Proposal Development Workshop. You can find all the Proposal Development Workshops on this link on Research Academy. We hope that you enjoyed today, where we introduce you to how to find a sponsor and start figuring out how to align your work with the people who will fund you potentially. The series itself is designed such that you can go through the entire arc of developing a relationship with a funder and submitting a proposal. And that's however you want to do it. So this is all recorded and on funding.asu.edu/events. Am I done?
Yeah, so I'll get started. This first topic is proposal research strategy. This takes a big picture look at what's going on with sponsors and programs before necessarily you have a solicitation in hand. I'm Keith Aspinall. I'm a senior strategic intelligence analyst on the RD team, and I'm joined by my colleagues Catherine Chen, who's also on the strategic intelligence team, and our opportunity manager and assistant director, Haley Bohall. For this presentation, I'll be giving an overview of what competitive intelligence is and why you should incorporate some elements into it in developing your research strategy for the work that you're doing. And then we'll be talking about understanding that research landscape and how you use some of that information to inform your proposal development process. Haley will talk about the importance of review, and then we'll have some time for questions. So first, what is competitive intelligence? If you hear competitive intelligence, what is that? You may think we're hackers or super spies or do stuff with cool visualizations. Unfortunately, what we do is we sit in front of a computer and we gather data and we transform it into usable information for our stakeholders. But this can be valuable in when you are looking for research funding. Competitive intelligence has its roots in the private sector. So whether it's apparel companies, cellular providers, defense contractors, they're all competing for share in the marketplace. So they want to know what their competitors are doing, what the markets are like, how their products are positioned, what industries are they participating in or do they need to be aware of to make good business decisions. How do vendors support their overall enterprise? And then, of course, what do their customers want? So we've been at the forefront here at ASU of adapting those practices into supporting the research enterprise, and you may wonder how that happens. And all of those 6 areas kind of graphed into what we need to be aware of when we are being competitive in the research space. So our competitors are other universities, other researchers who are competing for the awards that we're interested in. The markets are those funding opportunities that our researchers are interested in. The product is the research expertise of the faculty. What you have is the product that we're essentially selling. The research fields kind of are the industries where what's growing, what's of interest to sponsors. Vendors are the other assets that we can bring into proposals and into our research, whether those are facilities or special instrumentation that we have here on campus, or external partners that we can bring in to make our proposal stronger. And the last one is the customers are the sponsors who are providing the money. And you may be concerned with, like, okay, so how do I bring this into what I'm doing? I have a solicitation in front of me. I want to respond to it. How am I going to bring in this new area? And I want you to keep calm, because you're already doing some level of competitive intelligence in your work. Because if you're a researcher, you are staying on top of what's going on in your field, so you know what's going on in the research field, and you bring your expertise. And essentially, you're doing CI to stay on top of that. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to bring a process into those other 4 areas that are outside of the solicitation. That's before you have 4 weeks to submit a proposal, so that you're prepared and are responsive to what a sponsor wants. So this will primarily be focusing on funding opportunities and sponsors, but it also blends into competitors and other assets at the university. But the biggest takeaway you can take away from this presentation, and that we have other points, but is if you understand the past awards the sponsors made, and you understand what their future strategy is, what they want to fund in the future, you will be able to place your proposal in a better context to be more competitive to get research funding. So the standard principles of competitive intelligence, and this is very big picture, and some of these apply to the work that Catherine and I do, who are working with clients and stakeholders and leadership to provide them insights into what we need to do here at ASU. And many of these will apply to you, but they may have a different level of importance in the work that you do. The first step is that it's strategic, right? We're looking to advance the organization. In our work, we try to be unbiased. We're not looking to justify a response. We're looking to see what the environment is like so that we can make a honest assessment of what is the best way forward for ASU. In your own work, it's keeping an open mind on like what are the best opportunities and what are the best fits for your work. We do want measurable data. Quantitative data can provide about a lot of support to our findings, because there's a lot of sense of what's happening, and qualitative assessments are important, but the data backup provides a more grounded assessment, but they are both important. And then the last two I think are the most important, is actionable. We do not want to just provide information. When you're going through this step in deciding which opportunities you want to pursue, you don't want nice to know information. You want information, data analysis that you can act upon and integrate into your proposals, into your research strategy, so that you can be more competitive. And the last step, and I think this is very important if you're engaging in this, because this is not your core function, this is not your job to do competitive intelligence, is you want a repeatable process that becomes easy, because then it becomes incorporated and you're better positioned to be aware of what's going on in the funding area for your research field. So this repeatable process makes it more likely it happens, because it becomes easier to do and easier to incorporate. So I think I may have already kind of covered this. Why is this useful and what's the value of CI? But just to reiterate some of these points more. 5 things to just reiterate are time. So there is a time investment to do this work, but it pays off in the back end by directing your time to those opportunities and those sponsors that are best fit for your research. Timing also matters. So if you've gotten started in research and what solicitations are open, what can I apply to? This approach backs you out of being responsive to the now. What are the opportunities that are coming from a sponsor in the future? What are those bigger opportunities that, depending on where you're at in your career, maybe you're not ready for, but how do you build your capacity to get there in 2 years or 5 years? And it just gives you a broader awareness of what funding is coming in the future. And these last 3 all kind of go together in terms of best fit: the sponsors, the programs, the departments that are the best fit for the work that you want to do. How do you differentiate yourself in this space by seeing what's happened with past awardees, or what the current language is in awards, because publications and awards are complementary, but they are different in terms of how to approach them. So how you differentiate your work is important, and the CI, taking the CI approach, can help with that. And then also just understanding your competition. Again, that goes into publications being a little bit different than the funding space. So what does that look like? So how do you do this on your own? Again, this is not a novel process, but it is a mindset to find information that will be helpful. What we do in our work is we look at the external environment to collect data and organize it into information. And a lot of times in other areas, that's where it stops. But we want to take that next step to analyze it, to, again, create that actionable intelligence that improves decision-making and supports the work that we want to do. So our first step in any process, any project, is planning. What is your motivation? Your motivation is to get research funding. You create a checklist of items that you need to take care of. It may include the solicitation, but again, some of this work is before you even have a solicitation in hand. So what is it that you want to do? What are your key research questions? Will this sponsor fund my research, right? And some of that, again, may come from a solicitation, but you need to understand the sponsor and the programs that sponsor offers to make sure it's the best fit for you. And do background to understand your audience. And in this case, it is most likely going to be the sponsor, so that you know what kind of questions to ask and what kind of information you're looking for. And some of these questions come from experience. If you are new to applying for funding, this still will seem overwhelming on what to do, but by giving yourself more context about what the organization wants and what they funded in the past can give you more confidence to write your proposal. And the last one is to manage expectations. We do this with our clients and who we do our reporting for. From your perspective, managing expectations is all the work that we're talking about. There's unlikely to be a silver bullet that if you do this one thing, you will definitely win. But it's a series of steps to inform yourself and better prepare yourself for when you are writing a proposal to be more responsive and more engaging with the sponsor so that they are more likely to fund your work. Collection process is pretty standard. You need to understand what's going on. You're collecting your information. Keep in mind what you're trying to do while you're engaging in this work. And again, since this is not your core function, you need to know when to stop. This is not meant to be an expansive process that's going on at the same time as you're writing your proposal. But it is background so that, again, you're using your time effectively. And we have a note there that, and a lot of these points we'll talk about more directly in how to do this work. This is, again, very big picture of our process of the work we do. So in terms of analysis, it is iterative. As you go through it, you may go back into the collection process to find more answers, ask more questions. That remain objective is important for us in the work we do as we do our reporting. For you, it may be just, again, is this the best fit for you? Rather than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, maybe there's another opportunity that's better suited for your time, or you need to reassess how you're framing your work to make it more amenable to a sponsor. The big part of this is identifying patterns and themes, because you're looking for those trends that you can incorporate into your proposal development. Again, always keep in mind what you're trying to figure out. As you develop this process more, you may have different methods and tools that you incorporate. I look at a past award history, I dump information into Excel, I run a pivot table. There may be better tools for that, or other tools that you incorporate and other approaches that you take to get the information. And some of it can involve human intelligence and talking to people and whatnot. And the last one is, what are those gaps? Again, you're not going to find, if I do this thing, I'm going to win, but it illuminates those things that you need to look deeper into, and how do I respond to this, or what are other areas to address? And once you've done all that work, you can weave it into, you've made those networks and connections, you can weave it together for your findings. We have to write our reports. You fortunately don't have to do that. You just get to incorporate it into the work you're doing. And when you get to the proposal writing, it informs your story, right? You are making a more convincing, compelling case to a sponsor because you understand what their needs are, what their desires are as part of a program, to make what you are pitching more interesting to them. And some of this we are talking about in other PDWs in terms of the actual proposal writing, but it all weaves into that. It all builds. And that's why this is a series, because it all kind of ties together on how to be more effective in obtaining grant funding. So I've gone over a lot of, this may be reiterating, another way to just look at it is it helps with decision making, how you use your time. By taking that longer perspective, you can identify opportunities and weaknesses in what you're doing, and how to fill in those gaps. It helps with the planning, because okay, this is good for me now, it's not good for me right now. I know this is going to open in November, and rather than waiting for a solicitation to open, I can start preparing now. And then just being better informed allows you to be aware of any changes in programs, so you're not caught off guard by big changes in programs, or funding changes, or program going away that you're counting on. So all of this is just background that helps. And I said this at the beginning, the big takeaway from today is, if you understand past awards and future strategy, you understand the sponsor better and can position yourself better. I have one more thing to talk about, and then you'll luckily get to hear from Catherine and Haley, and I will be quiet, but we're going to talk these 6 main strategies to really understanding and being responsive to sponsors. I'm going to talk a little more about learning about the sponsor. Catherine is going to talk about the importance of thoroughly reading the solicitation and watching program webinars when they're available, how to analyze previous awardees, and encouraging you to talk to and developing a network through the program managers and colleagues that are familiar with the program. And then Haley will wrap it up by talking about the importance of review. So learning about the sponsor. Ideally, you do this before solicitation is in hand. If you're already applying to something, go ahead and learn about the sponsor first. Do a little bit of background so that you understand what they want, to make sure that you're in the right place and that, again, you'll be using your time effectively. And again, as I've said a couple of times already, how do you become appealing to that sponsor? 3 core concepts to understanding a sponsor are understanding their organizational structure. Agencies like National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, many philanthropic organizations, they make grants. That's what they do. There are other agencies, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of Energy, Ag, have significant grant funding, but they do a lot of other stuff to support a lot of the other parts of their mission. So it's understanding the organization to find those units and departments within those agencies, within those departments that do make grant funding, so that you can then understand their priorities better by looking at strategic plans, the statements that they make on the website, what their budget information is like, to see what's coming or going. And then, of course, what the money flow is. That gets more into the budgets, but where are they actually putting money into? They may state research aims in the budget. Does it show that there's money there for it? Are the programs there? And again, this is very big picture, but it's part of a process. If you're looking at those strategic plans, if you're looking at their budgets, if you look at the press and media around it, it makes you more knowledgeable about what they want and what they want to do. And if you're able to respond to that in your proposals, you'll be more effective. Most of the agencies have strategic plans. I don't have a visual for it, but National Science Foundation is still very strong on their 10 big ideas, which came out 5-6 years ago, and incorporating elements of those big ideas in your proposals will be helpful, because again, you're responding to their needs. Budget information, it's daunting the first time you look at it. NSF's budget formatting has not changed in 10 years. It's the same template. So you can go in, and once a justification comes out, you can take a look at it and what's growing, what's going away, what's new in those agencies that you've identified. Press and media can also be helpful, particularly with those agencies or groups that don't have a good funding database. DoD, bottom right corner, their MURI releases a press release to announce awards. National Endowment for Humanities, I believe, has one, but again, press release gives you information, types of projects that they're funding. Individual, ASU, here at ASU, we make announcements of awards. Other universities do the same. That can provide some background on specific programs or what's going on in space. DOE is very good about putting out, anytime they give away money, they have a press release. And there's other ways to find that information. Again, it's not to spend hours and hours upon this, but the more informed you are, the better response that you can make. And with that, I am done, and I will gladly hand off to Catherine.
Thanks, Keith. I'm gonna stop my video because my internet is a little laggy, but now that you know a little bit about how to, think about a sponsor that might be appropriate for your research program and interests. Let's say you're flipping around their webpage and you're starting to look at specific programs, or maybe you already have a solicitation in hand that someone emailed you. And really the questions you should be keeping in mind are, am I even applying to the correct program? And what will help inform that is understanding the goal of the program, as well as, and understand that goal will also help you understand how you can make that question or topic a good fit for the program. Next slide, please. So a really basic resource, but really important, is the program page. Like, you want to avail yourself of all the information that a sponsor has made available about the program that you're interested in. NSF consolidates all the stuff onto a given program page where there's a synopsis, which tells you what the program is looking for. And it has a whole bunch of extra info that's useful, like the webinar information, the actual solicitation itself, the contact info for the program officer, and it has other resources as well. Sometimes these are things like FAQs, And you definitely want to take a look at that. NSF also makes it easy on their program page to navigate to past awards. But this, oh, okay, thanks, Keith. And once you're on the program page, you've read everything you can about a given program, make sure you also read the actual solicitation. So these are going to answer a lot of the same questions that I highlighted about the program, but it's also going to have a lot of the nitty gritty about eligibility. So this is where you check that you're not wasting your time with a program that actually you're not even eligible for. So read it really thoroughly, and then read it again. Next slide, please. And I've already highlighted that you can attend webinars if they're available, depending on the sponsor, as well as office hours. So these are often recorded and you can watch them after the fact, but I also want to highlight that if you actually attend in person, it can be really valuable because that's your opportunity to actually get to ask the questions that you're thinking about. And you also get to hear what other people who are attending those webinars are thinking about. And those other folks are the people who are going to also be applying for that funding, you know, so it can be really useful to hear like what kinds of questions are they asking of the program officers. Next slide, please. And I want to frame that these webinars and office hours are these resources to connect and learn from these program officers. So you can find them for a given sponsor or opportunity in a few different ways. Different sponsors make them available. You can see NSF has a whole list here on the left, but if you can't find a webinar or office hour for an opportunity you're interested in, I suggest you just Google it. And you know, if it's available, you might be able to find it, or you might be able to find something pre-recorded, and you should watch that anyway. Next slide, please. And another strategy that I want to highlight that uses a lot of the competitive intelligence principles that Keith talked about earlier is actually taking a look at past awards. So the reason that you want to do this is that looking at these past awards is a good way to look at what successful applications and successful applicants actually look like. And you know, it's implied, but to say it really explicitly, the point of doing that is to make sure that your application can also look that way, you know, so to increase your chances of actually getting funded through this program that you're interested in. Next slide, please. So these slides will be made available after. So we provided a list of some of the databases for the big federal sponsors here on the left, as well as some detail about other funders that do not necessarily have good databases. So it really varies by sponsor. But if there's a particular sponsor that you're interested in that's not listed here, I do encourage that you Google, for example, previous awards and then the actual program name, and then just see what comes up. And maybe you'll find some of the press releases that Keith was talking about, even if there's not an actual database. Next slide, please. So I'm going to highlight a few of the questions that you can ask as you actually look at past award data. So you might already be thinking about this, but a really obvious one is to ask who is actually getting this money, right? So what you're really thinking is, how do I compare to these past winners? And these might be folks that you're already familiar with in your own field, or maybe some of these are people that you only learn about by looking at these past awards. You can look at things like, what career stage are these people at? So let's say this is, you notice most of the people being funded are actually early career faculty, and that might be great news for you if you are also an early career faculty member. You can also look these people up and see what kind of funding history they have, what kind of publication record they have, and then you can begin to gauge how you might compare to that. You might also notice some other trends begin to emerge as you just look at all of these other folks. So maybe they have something else in common that I haven't highlighted here. But that's why it can be really useful to look at this broad list and just begin to get an idea of who these people are. And one thing that you can do is, once you've identified some of these folks, is, are you comfortable reaching out to any of these people? So maybe these are people who are already in your network, or these are people that you could you know, just send an email to, being polite and asking them if they would be willing to talk about their experience with this award. We'll talk a little bit more about specific things that you can ask them if you choose to do this. Another thing that you can look at if you look at past awards is where are those folks located? So which institutions are actually getting these awards? You might notice that certain institutions are getting repeat awards. So if you notice that, then you can ask, like, why are these institutions performing well? How are they able to do so? Is it that they have particular features that it seems like this program is really favoring? And if you do that, then you can ask, how does ASU compare to those institutions? Does it have any of these same features that I could highlight in my own proposal? Next slide, please. And one of the things that is sometimes relevant, but not always, is geographic location. So depending on the proposal, you might notice that there are certain geographic discriminators that seem to be associated with successful proposals. And if that's the case, you might be able to ask, well, is there anything special about where ASU is that I could leverage within my own work or my own proposal? Next slide, please. And you're probably already thinking about this, but you can also use this past award data to begin to understand what kinds of topics and research questions the sponsor is funding through this program. So by reading the abstracts and the titles, you can begin to see, well, are certain topics or questions favored? And then you can understand whether or not your own research aligns with those topics, or maybe it goes beyond it. So you're really asking here is, how does my research fit with what the program has funded previously? And understanding this can give you an idea about what you need to highlight about your work, right? So if this is a topic they seem to be really interested in, that's great news, right? You know, you really want to hit home that you're doing really exciting work here. If this is a topic that they don't seem like they're as interested in, that could suggest that you're not looking at the correct program, or perhaps it suggests that you really need to highlight what makes this work a great extension of what has already been done, these topics that they've already shown previous interest in. Next slide, please. Looking at past award data can also give you insight into success rates. So you can see how many awards are actually being made per year, whether or not those are changing over time. And really, this is all to inform your view or your understanding of how competitive this program is that you're looking at. Obviously, the problem with looking at past award data is that you don't actually know how many proposals were submitted. So it can be a little bit hard to tell how competitive a program was. But you can actually sometimes find success rates being published separately, and then you can get a good idea. So maybe let's say there's 2 institutes at NIH where your research could be good fits, and one is significantly more competitive than the other. That might inform where you choose to allocate your time. Next slide, please. And you can also see how much money people are getting per award if you look at these past award data. And the reason you want to do this is that in the solicitation, there will be usually budget maximums. So that's what's allowable. But if you look at past award data, you can see what people are actually receiving. So actual amounts. Sometimes these awards might be significantly less than the maximum amount. And you notice that that is what seems to be the case for almost all these proposals. And then that can give you a better idea about what might be realistic for you to ask for, and what kind of budget range you're working with as you put together a proposal. Next slide, please. And lastly, if this is an award or if this is a program that requires you put together a team, again, past awardees can tell you how many team members you might need in order to put together a team that has a high probability of being funded. You can ask things like, how many of these team members are actually internal or external to the lead institution? If there are external members, you can ask who they are and where they are. You can also see whether or not teams look like they're really interdisciplinary or not. And all these things can help inform you as you put together your own team to go after a given program. Next slide, please. And one last strategy that I like to highlight is the importance of actually talking to past awardees, applicants, and program officers. And the point of doing this is really to learn from their experience applying to this program. In the program officer's case is to like pick their brains for everything that they're willing to give you about this program. Next slide, please. So for awardees and applicants, I've already highlighted that you can find these awardees by looking at the past award data. Applicants may be a little bit harder. You might have to leverage your own already developed networks in order to find out who's applied but hasn't necessarily been successful in the past. But it can still be useful to talk to them because awardees and applicants can answer questions like, well, what kind of advice should I know, before I even begin to apply for this program or as I go through this process. These are also folks who have already had their proposals, well, in some cases have had their proposals reviewed already, and they may or may not be willing to share the feedback, which could be really useful to you as you put together your own proposal. Should also ask them things like if they're going to apply again, what would do the same or differently. And lastly, I wouldn't do this right off the bat, especially if I was cold emailing somebody, but if I already had a pre-existing relationship with somebody or I have a really great conversation with them, I might feel out whether or not they would be willing to actually share their proposal. And that can be really valuable so you can see like actually what they did. Next slide, please. And program officers, I already mentioned the webinars and the office hours as ways which you can get in touch with them and talk to them, but you can also reach out to them and talk to them directly. So for the process of doing that, make sure you're really prepared, so you've already actually read the solicitation and all the program information. You want to already have an idea in mind that you want to pitch them. You want to also not waste their time. So, be respectful and have done your homework. And as far as the logistics go ahead and email them. So don't call them, but just email them and ask to set up a meeting to chat. And after that meeting, you want to maintain this professional relationship because, you might circle back to them. This is a person that you want on your side. So be polite, thank them, follow up. And then if you have additional questions, you can take comfort in the fact that you've established this good relationship, hopefully, with them. And one of the things that you can talk about with a program officer, among other things, is how does my specific idea and research question fit with what this program is looking to fund? Because these are going to be the folks that really know what this program is trying to do. You can also take this time to ask them other questions that may not be answered in the solicitation or other program info. Next slide, please. And with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Haley.
Thank you, Catherine. Now that you've gathered data and analyzed your sponsor, just as those preliminary competitive intelligence steps can make your proposal more competitive, a thorough review makes your proposal stronger. Next slide. When preparing your proposal, you want to keep in mind who the reviewers are. Next slide. Funding agencies use different processes for reviewing, and understanding how your proposal will be reviewed should influence your strategy and response. Remember, proposal review does not always necessarily mean the same thing as peer review, and some sponsors include different levels of agency staff as part of the review process. Additionally, some organizations might include subject matter experts or non-technical staff, or even lay board members. Next slide. One way you might approach reviewing your work is through color-coded reviews. Color-coded reviews are an industry practice and a logical way to review your proposal. The review system has multiple levels of colors, each representing an increasing maturity of your proposal. Of course, not every proposal goes through the entire spectrum of colors, but early planning and allowing ample time for review will help ensure your proposal is responsive and competitive. The two most recommended colors are here, pink and red. A pink team review looks early on at storyboards and mock-ups to confirm the sponsor, the solution, and to validate your proposal strategy. A red team review looks at any final proposal drafts to predict how the sponsor will score the proposal and to confirm the compliance with the RFP. Next slide. Another way to make your application more competitive is to participate as a reviewer. Next. Reviewers gain firsthand knowledge of review processes, learn about common problems, discover strategies to write strong proposals, and through serving on a review panel, you meet new colleagues. In the next few slides, I'll highlight a couple different sponsors. More information is available about how to become a reviewer on each sponsor's website, and I've linked those direct sites in the notes here on the slides that you'll receive after this webinar. Next. The National Endowment for the Humanities requests scholars, cultural institution leaders, and humanities center staff. Next. The National Science Foundation requests that you email a program officer that fits your area of expertise. Next. NIH requests scientists specific for certain study sections. They have an online application process. Next. And this is your opportunity to contribute and learn more about our internal limited submissions review process, and also to learn more about your research across the university. You can be placed on our list of reviewers to contact as needed. This standing panel provides an opportunity to learn more about your peers and their work. Please reach out to your research administrator or your assistant or associate deans for research in your college, or email me at limited.submissions@asu.edu, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about this process. Next. So just to wrap it up today, we've learned about the 6 strategic concepts for growing and understanding your competitiveness when preparing a response to a sponsor. Of course, we want you to learn about the program, read the program information, and especially the solicitation. Watch and review any of the program webinars, analyze any previous awards, talk to program managers, past awardees, and applicants, and of course, review your own work and also review work for others. We're happy to take any questions either live, please unmute yourself and speak, or you can feel free to use the chat and we'll be checking in there as well. I see there's a couple questions in there that have been addressed, but we're happy to take any questions you have. Thank you so much. Faye, would you end the recording? So if there's anyone who'd like to ask a specific question, doesn't feel comfortable on the recording.